Hello.
Hello.
How you going?
I'm going well. Do you want to know what's been happening in the world of podcasting?
I do. I do. Let me know. Tell
I
me.
think you probably know this because it's a little bit related to Joe Rogan.
Oh, a classic, yes. My boy Joe.
Your boy Joe. Well, kind of related to Joe, but also related to someone else, possibly even more famous than Joe Rogan, if you can believe it.
Oh,
But who
can
also,
only lead.
but who also uses a three-letter, what is it, acronym?
Yeah.
K-
KKW, baby.
KKW. That's the one. How did you know?
Oh, like I hear things. I get around. I'm a cool
You
kid.
get around. So Kim Kardashian West is making a podcast on Spotify. Also recently in the news in the podcast world, if you know anything about podcasts, you probably already know that Joe Rogan has recently been acquired, or at least his show has been picked up by Spotify. Also, Gimlet Media has made the move to Spotify, and they're a massive player in podcasts, in the podcasting world. If you know a little bit about podcasts, you probably have heard this. If you're not and you've just found this somehow, welcome. Thanks for joining us. But instead of just chatting about this news, because I've basically covered that headline, shall we talk about how we can kind of take some of these lessons and apply them to our own content and our own businesses and our own lives?
Definitely. I think the most important thing you should do is sell your podcast for $100 million.
I think that's a very important thing to do as well. Well, what do you
Or
think?
Kim Kardashian.
Or just be Kim. You know, let's digress. There's a lot I could say about the Kardashians. I won't even begin. So let's talk about. You know what I want to actually ask you is how you feel about exclusivity with content.
All right, all right, all right.
Sorry,
I
this
don't.
took a bit of a turn already.
No, that's okay. It's all right. Um, I think it can be good and it can be bad. That's a real good answer.
Mm,
That one.
please
Um,
expand.
I understand wanting to get a pretty broad appeal by not remaining exclusive. A lot of times, exclusivity sort of just means, hey, you're gonna have to pay for this content. Which I mean, you should pay for at least some content. Everyone's doing it for free.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think it's important to be accessible, sort of like relatively broadly. But as we can see, I think in the case of Joe Rogan, is that he's got this massively broad appeal on YouTube, but he keeps on coming up against censorship barriers on YouTube. So it's like, well, exclusivity can obviously for him mean freedom, and I think that's what we're going to start seeing. So I'm fairly pro exclusivity. I am just a Spotify premium user though, so it's no change for me. Might be a change for some other people. I'm
Yeah,
happy
for
to pay
sure.
that.
In terms of exclusive content, though, the kind of division of all these streaming services, I think what's happening is it's becoming a lot less like things are so niched now, right? So that we don't have as much relatability, say over the water cooler as we once had. We're not all watching the same programs, getting our news from the same sources. And as things go exclusive, like you can only watch a certain show, like say a Netflix show on Netflix, something exclusive to Hulu or something that we can usually get on Stan or whatever. What do you think about different content having these separate platforms and not being accessible by everyone?
As someone who grew up in Australia, it doesn't seem like the worst thing in the world to me
Mm.
because I mean, I feel like every Australian knows. you're a household that like had Foxtel, or you're a house that didn't have Foxtel, and now you're only two options. And now we've got like 3 or 4 streaming services. Foxtel has their own. They've got 2 streaming services now, plus their main service. And we're starting to butt up against that, like, oh, this is a lot of money, and I have to start choosing where I'm going to spend my money and what service provides the content that I want. But for me, I feel like in Australia and in not countries that aren't America and Canada, to a lesser extent the UK, where we're not like, oh, there's tons and tons of different cable services, and this sucks that we've got to spend so much money to get everything we want. Whereas if I was in America, I definitely see it as a problem of going back to what they had. Like you speak to Americans that before like the prevalence of streaming services, and it was like, oh yeah, I spent $150 on cable, and you got to get like 15 different cable services to get everything that you wanted. And then Netflix was really like that first. Oh, hey, no, it's fine. Cut your cord, just use us. And then HBO was like, oh, we've got our own now. Disney's got their own. And I think they're probably seeing it as, oh, we're going back that way. Whereas I see it like, oh, I got a bit of choice now, and that's good. So that's the pros and cons. I don't see it as being too bad a thing. When it comes to like super niche things, I think with podcasts, like podcasts' strengths are how niche they are.
Totally. Can I just pause for 1 sec, because the sun's coming in the window and I'm so overexposed. BRB, 1 sec.
Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. That is the strength of podcasts. But let's turn this conversation around a little bit, because what I wanted to talk about today is what we can learn from KKW, JRE, Joe Rogan Experience, and so on Spotify, is how Spotify is competing with such big players in the industry, specifically, well, 2, I was going to say 1, but 2. Apple, obviously, the biggest podcast platform for like 15 years. How I used to listen to podcasts is through the iTunes store, put it onto my iPod, and then listen to it. That seems like a billion years ago, like how retro my iPod. And then with Joe especially, is they're competing with YouTube. So these massive monopolies that I don't think any of us would have predicted someone could compete with them. And now we have Spotify like really making a go of it, and I think going to do quite well from it. So how do we compete with huge companies in our industry? I'm talking about the royal we, all of us, or big monopolies. How can we do that? And how have Spotify done that? Can you shed some light on it for us? I
think all that Spotify's done, and it's a really smart move, is they've just listened to, well, I'm speculating that they've just listened to the complaint of the user base or the creation side of the user base of YouTube. Some companies, they get so big and there's so many layers of management and there's so much like political strife within the company, because just like the size of a corporation, they just get like that.
They get really big, they get really slow at making changes, lots of red tape.
Yeah. And I think that they're going all in one direction, and it's not really, I feel like it's not in the spirit of YouTube where they're going. And a lot of creators think that. And I think Spotify is just going, well, hey, we'll do that. And Spotify will run into the same problem. That's just my darling puppy in the background
Uh-oh.
Weaking a toy. I think Spotify has just listened to creators who are sick of just not being heard. So that's a big thing. Whenever you watch a channel and a creator starts opening up about the whole process of dealing with,
Oh my God, the puppy in the background.
you know, all these big creators complain about, like, oh, I got copyright striked, or I got demonetized. I don't know what's going on. Once you get big enough on there, you do get people which you can directly get in contact with, and you listen to a few really big creators, and it's like, yeah, I got copyright strike for X, Y, or Z, and I had to email basically my like handler who handle a smaller amount of people. But
Right,
if you're not that
or it's a case of you post on Twitter and then the fan outrage is so huge that finally some attention is put on it.
well, yeah. So it's just YouTube's just gotten so big, and I don't think they've become agile enough to deal with the space that they're in, which is constantly changing. And like we all remember Adpocalypse and all that, and you know, often the way to deal with these things when you have billions of hours, or like 1 billion hours being uploaded every day, or whatever it is this might be an issue, ban everything.
Right.
And sort it out. You kill them all and let God sort it out.
But I mean, the change in digital content, just in general, like it is literally changing so quickly all the time. Like we have worked in video production, like Pickford Media for about 5 years now, but beyond that, like in TV, you've worked in music. Even just saying, you know, I used to listen to a podcast on an iPod. I used to have to plug in my iPod to my computer, go onto the iTunes store, download it, put it across. Like things change so rapidly and you have to keep up with that. And what is working for audiences and what they're engaging with and loving today isn't necessarily going to be true for tomorrow. And it's keeping up and knowing that the shelf life is short and you have to evolve.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think the thing we can all kind of take away is using that small size when we're in startup mode or just starting out a business or wanting to scale, and being nimble and taking the risks while you still kind of can. Because once you get to a certain size, I mean, you can't do that so much. But it's also a constant journey in business of responding to needs and listening to your client base and finding the gaps.
Yeah, when you're small and you're nimble, you can attack and you can fail and get away with it. But also you're not usually playing with other people's money, which I think is a big thing. I mean, like it's a bit different when you look at someone like Spotify who have a lot of investors.
Yeah.
But if you're a smaller company, even if you're like a small business and you've got a handful of employees and you're turning over like a few $1 million a year or whatever, if you're playing with your money, like you can risk it. You can be a lot less risk averse with what you do, which means you can respond faster. I think like Spotify, YouTube has so much money and investment in it, and I think that's one of the problems they come up with.
Right, and so many stakeholders to keep happy, I guess. Another thing that's kind of important in this case with Spotify is the timing. It's knowing everything. It's knowing all the complaints that people have had about YouTube, or I mean, I don't know if it's the same with Apple, if there's anything that they've responded to in the same way, but it's not having that timing and like, okay, things with YouTube have been a little bit weird for really like the last few years. All the algorithmic changes, Adpocalypse, like a lot of weird things, I think in the last 2 years in particular. So for Spotify to kind of have that timing up their sleeve, I don't know if it was coincidental or if they've been waiting for something to happen. I think we can all kind of take that lesson of striking out with something while your competitor is too busy, whatever that looks like.
Mm. Especially if your competitor's big enough to have people reporting on it, that gives you a really good advantage. You know, like if there's some sort of political turmoil in the company, and you can see a spot, if you're good enough, if you're agile enough to really be able to strike there, you're really cutting down a lot of risk for yourself. And I think the whole thing. So there is a bit of an exodus from Apple, and I wonder how big a deal Apple thinks it is. I mean, I haven't heard Apple respond to anything, and I've never heard anyone complain about the podcast app.
No, me neither.
But they don't really advertise anything. Like, it's just a hosting platform and an interface.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, I know Spotify will. I mean, they're not going to like market. I mean, I guess they might do. I'm not going to say not, but. You know, like you're going to open up Spotify and you're going to see a bunch of like trending podcasts. Well, I mean, you already do when you open it up, and it's like they still use they've got a pretty good algorithm for music suggestions. I'd say that'll start picking up with the podcast suggestions. So really, like going to something like that is good in a lot of ways, whereas, you know, Apple, you're just dumping it on there and you're hoping that people know about you. There might be like a top 10 of the week or something.
I totally disagree with that. Apple, I mean, when you open up Apple Podcasts, in particular, the one to worry about is the new and noteworthy, which comes up first before even like most listened or whatever most popular podcasts. And so when people start their podcasts, that's kind of like the list to get on, and there are definitely tactics to do that, which is something we kind of do at Wildflower Podcasts if anybody is wanting to create a podcast. But so Apple is traditionally where all the other podcasts apps pull from. So so my app, I use Podcast Addict, which I don't know why, there's no reason for it. I think when I got my phone, however many phones ago, that was just the app that came up when I searched podcasts. I had an Android phone. And then, you know, when you get a new phone, you just kind of like carry on out of habit or whatever. But I believe Podcast Addict just pulls from the Apple Podcasts. What do you call that? Hosting their server. Yeah, exactly. Index. So I think that may have a bit to do with Apple's kind of longevity in the podcast game. And I wonder if that will, like, if Spotify will offer their server to any apps or anything, if they just strictly want people to use Spotify or, yeah, because you're right. I mean, Apple, they don't need to advertise. And maybe that's why Spotify's been able to come in, because Apple's kind of been resting on, you know, this is how everyone's traditionally done it, that mentality.
Plus, yeah, Apple are getting a slice of the pie from anyone who downloads an app on their phone as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, when you pay through, and like this may have changed, this could change day to day, but as it is now, as I understand it, like if you pay for an app through the App Store or like pay for a subscription through it, they're getting a piece of that. Yeah, like Apple gets a piece of everything that goes through its stores. So maybe they're not overly worried. Plus, they've got, like, Apple's got all of them. You know, like it's one thing. I think the move of Joe Rogan in particular is a bigger loss to YouTube than it ever would be for Apple. Only because I watch Joe Rogan podcasts. Like, I don't listen to them. I don't put them on and go for a ride or whatever.
Yeah.
I have them in the background and I actually watch them when I'm doing other things.
Well, you're kind of contradicting yourself there. Have it on in
Well,
the
yeah, I know.
background.
Well, yeah. Then I play them through YouTube
Yeah.
rather than anything else. And I think with Spotify, to me, it indicates that they want to move into video.
Yeah,
And
it's a really interesting choice, and I'm curious to see what they end up doing if they do more video content. Because I mean, even when you listen to a song on Spotify, there often is not like the music video, but a video that plays along with a lot of the popular stuff. So who knows?
Really interested to see what Kim's podcast is going to be like.
Me too,
like
but
video-wise or what?
if it's what? Going to be video?
If it's going to be, if it's going to be filmed, if it's going to be like a traditional podcast, what kind of format? Because it's all about, it's a law podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, and this is kind of one of those things where I feel like they've gone into a meeting and they're like, this works and this works, let's combine them. Because, I mean, the true crime podcasts, they're like the best genre of all podcasts. Kim Kardashian, the most famous person ever. Combine the two, we can only win. And I'm like, I actually don't know if... I don't feel particularly interested in hearing Kim Kardashian's point of view on a legal case. Like, I don't know.
Especially how many Kardashian fans are law fans or
Right, what's the overlap?
Or even podcast fans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, maybe not so much that one, but I feel like, and maybe I've got a bias in my own mind of what I see as a Kardashian fan.
Yeah.
I don't see that as a person who's like, oh, I'm gonna maybe if it was like fashion, they've actually gone, hey, there's people out there who aren't buying any of our things. Let's target them. It seems wild. I mean, I'll listen to a couple of them, see.
Yeah, look, I'm going to be honest, I lost you for most of what you said. But yes, interesting point about I don't know what the overlap of Kardashian fans and podcast fans is. And that will be curious to see what happens. Anyway, let's wrap up this episode. Is there anything else you wanted to add to this conversation right now? I'm sure there is plenty you want to add.
No, I can't really think of anything. I'm just interested to see how all of this plays out. It's
me too. I'm so excited. Like I feel like such a nerd to say that, but I'm very excited to see what happens and if Spotify does get, into popular consciousness around podcasts.
It'll be interesting to see how many people or how they handle their two subscription levels.
Yes, true.
I wonder if they're just going to be ads interjecting on podcasts that already have ads on them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
And things like that.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for listening to this conversation about KKW and Joe Rogan and all the things. Hopefully you learn a little bit about both podcasting and about your own content and how you can be competing with those big companies. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.